Alright guys, today we're going to be looking at the SAQ or short answer question portion of the AP exam. So essentially you have 40 minutes for 3 questions and it is 20% of the overall grade. Obviously the number one thing would be the multiple choice, number 2 is the DBQ, and then SAQ is the next highest percentage of grade. So 3 questions. Now each question has 3 separate parts. 2 to 3 separate parts, but mostly 3 separate parts. So really 40 minutes for 9 questions, all right, which is approximately 4 minutes and 45 seconds per question. Question 1 is going to be a secondary source, like you're gonna get a stimulus, secondary source. Question 2 is a primary source stimulus, and then question 3 and 4 are no stimuluses. So there's 4 questions there. You have to do question 1, you have to do question 2, but you can pick between question 3 and 4, which one you want to do. If you're using this for AP World History, where those sources come from and the dates that they come from are going to vary versus a push. And AP Euro, the dates are going to vary as well if you're using that for that. But as you can see here, here's kind of the date breakdown. The real big thing is your non-stimulus based question, number 3 and 4. Those are going to be from 2 different eras, if you can see here. And so, whatever one's your strongest in, probably the one you want to try to answer. But you can pick at the time. Each SAQ is worth 3 points. Most SAQs have 3 parts, 1 point for each. So scoring is simple. Either you get it or you don't. Either you get the point or you don't. It's right or wrong. There's no partial credit. You've done it or you haven't got it, 1 or 0. This is where it's important to be specific and be concise, and we're going to talk about some strategies with doing that. One of the things you really want to remember as we go through, and we're going to dive deeper into this in a minute, but answer the prompt, and then cite something, name, use evidence, and explain or elaborate. So ACE, answer, cite, explain, right? We're going to answer the prompt, provide evidence, and then elaborate on it and how it answers the prompt. So some basic tips. Reword the prompt in the answer to be clear what you are answering and to stay on topic. Be sure to address the historical thinking skill used, right? If there's one in there, if it's a compare and contrast question, you better compare and contrast. You better use that language, a comparison language. If it's a continuity and change, you better use that language in there. If there's a stimulus, you must refer to the stimulus in your answer, right? Like there may be questions, don't just go way off on some tangent. If there's a stimulus there, use that stimulus. It must include specific historical evidence. Be specific, be concise, right? So make sure you are identifying specific historical evidence. Vague references or generalities are not enough, right? Use facts like relevant names and dates, right? Have like relevant, specific facts. Assume the reader has no background knowledge and make sure all your ideas are stated clearly. Again, be specific. And then use complete sentences, no bullet points, all right? No outlines, make sure it's complete sentences, but also no more than 3 sentences, all right? This is where it gets concise. Keep it to 2 to 3 sentences, no more than 3, all right? All right, so let's look at ACE. ACE, answer. Directly answer the question by identifying a specific historical claim or general historical assertion. Just answer the question. It is similar to making a thesis, right? An argument or claim. So, in a situation of selecting provided options, identify the selected option. In a situation of identifying similarity or differences, be sure to directly address both components of comparison. All right, so if we're looking at that, right, have some similarities and differences that you're addressing. All right, let's look at an example here. First, answer A, B, and C. All right, so number 1, there's 3 parts to it. We're going to look at just the first part. Briefly explain one example of how contact between Native Americans and Europeans brought changes to Native American societies in the period 1492 to 1700. First, 1 means 1, all right? Make sure you're not doing a bunch of examples. Don't go up there and say, oh yeah, the disease really impacted the Americans and also Columbian exchange really impacted the natives or something along those lines. Don't provide 2 examples, that's going to lose the point. Part of the time, you'll have 1, and then the next question will be like, briefly explain another example. And so sometimes they'll have that, but just make sure, like if it says 1, just stick to 1. All right, so right now what I want you to do is I want you to take a moment and write down an answer, right? You don't have to do the ACE, the full ACE, just answer the question, 1 sentence only, directly answer the question using the tips from the previous screen. If you don't know, that's fine, just do your best, just take a guess. I'll give you a second here to do that. Or pause, actually pause it. All right, now let's look at an example of an answer. So, the spread of contagious European-born diseases significantly decimated native populations. Right there, briefly explain one example of how contact between Native Americans and Europeans brought changes. Well, the spread of contagious European-born diseases significantly decimated the native populations. So it's specific, right? It doesn't just say diseases came. It told what diseases actually did, all right? So it's a very specific and clear answer, all right? So the next portion of this is citing, all right? Depending on the prompt, This component requires you to directly answer the question by identifying a specific historical claim. Really what's important here is you are providing specific factual information relevant to the answer, relevant to the prompt, right? And so this is where being specific is really important. You're citing information. This is where you could also refer back to the stimulus if there's a stimulus there. And so that's what's really key here, is that you're actually being specific in your citing at this point. This slide right here, I'm going to leave up for your reference for a couple of seconds. This is basically just some various tips. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the slide though. Just various tips that you can use when doing citation. You can come back to the video if you want. I'll leave it up for a few more seconds so it's easier to find. All right, so here's what I want you to do now. I want you to now write the citation, right? Give us whatever your answer was on the previous question. I want you to give a specific source that actually backs that up, right? Whatever your answer was, give a specific source that backs it up. If you don't know, just do your best, right? If you don't have anything specific, do your best. Pause here if you need to. All right, so here's the example I have. Natives did not possess natural immunities to smallpox and influenza, and almost 90% of them perished. So do you guys see what's happening here, right? Is 90% perished. Very specific, right? Specifically identifying diseases, right? Not just broad diseases, but natives did not possess natural immunities to smallpox and influenza. These are very specific diseases that attack, and how many, like an actual stat that showed how many died. So this is where we have that citation. So that's our second sentence, right? We got answer, second sentence, and now we have our third sentence, which is going to be elaborate or expand. So this last component requires you to explain how the answer best addresses the prompt. Like any writing prompt on the AP exam, there exists an intent and focus to assess historical understanding. All right, this explanation should connect or tie back to the answer, to the prompt, and fulfill its historical intent. Why expand? The explanation of the answer should include a further connection to direct or broad historical phenomenon relevant to the intent and focus on the question. So you really are just wanting to expand on it and show that, yeah, you know this information, all right? Make sure it ties back to the answer and the prompt. All right, take a second now and put in an elaboration for your last question. Do that last part for what you have so far. Pause here if you need to. All right, here's what I have. So, native population losses weakened their defenses, and European conquerors easily subjugated survivors and exploited their lands through colonization. So as you see, right, this expands on it. Native populations losses weakened their defenses, and European conquerors easily subjected survivors, exploited their lands. This also this shows an effect, right? We have a cause that he said before, the diseases, and it showed the effect of it. And so you can see that historical thinking scale also being implemented here, right? Showing what happened after the diseases happened. And so this right here is an example of your short answer question. Answer, cite, and elaborate, or answer, cite, and expand. This is our example on it. My next video, I'm going to actually give you guys an example of some previously written SAQs, and you're going to have the opportunity to try to grade them yourself and see how they actually did. So make sure that you have done this video first before you've done the other one. All right, see you guys later. Hey guys, welcome back. All right, we're going to look at the SAQ part 2. So what we're going to do next is I'm actually going to give you a SAQ to look at. I'm also going to provide you with some answers that people have given in the past. And I want you guys to actually read over these answers, and I want you to read over the answers and actually determine how many points you think that person got on their SAQ. So one thing I want you to remember as you're grading, and so I want you to actually write down a grade. Remember, as you're grading, either they get it right or they don't, right? And so each question has 3 parts, A, B, C. So they're either going to get a 0, a 1, a 2, or a 3. We're going to look at a few different examples here. So I want you guys to, you may need to pause a lot and kind of think about it and read through it. But first, let's look at the actual SAQ. So, use the passage below to answer all parts of the question that follows. Inner and Central Asia have long been seen as a zone of contact and transmission. Transmission being the key word here. A lengthy conveyor belt on which commercial and cultural wares traveled between the major civilizations of Eurasia. What are we really talking about here? Right, the Silk Road. The nomads had an essential but largely unacknowledged role in this cultural traffic. While nomadic empires, who comes to mind when you think of nomadic empires in Asia? Right, we think of the Mongols, right? It's the first thing that comes to mind. While nomadic empires had as their primary objective the control and exploitation of sedentary subjects, their secondary effect was the creation of numerous opportunities for cross-cultural contact, comparison, and exchange. Indeed, although nomads are normally included in the analysis of the political context of trans-Eurasian exchange, they're typically left out of the cultural equation. Here, the great sedentary civilizations are placed at center stage, particularly when scientific and cultural transfers are under consideration. So when we look at history, like a lot of times we think of all the major empires, right? We think of the Chinese dynasties, we think of the Roman Empire. We don't really think of the nomadic people and what their impact was on culture. But as we've seen, pastoral nomads were the chief initiators, promoters, and agents of this exchange between East and West in the 13th and 14th centuries. All right, so the question, identify one specific historical example of a cultural exchange between nomads and non-nomads that occurred in the period before 1450. And this is a key, right? You want to make sure you note that date, what happened before that time. For the period 1450 to 1750, identify one development that changed the role that Central Asian nomads played in the cross-regional exchanges as described in the passage. Again, we have a change of date, right? So really, we have the age of exploration during this time right here. So you want to keep that in mind, right? Like, keep having those dates figured out, like what were big events that were going on during this time. Pre-1450, we know the Mongols were the ruling empire, right? Until the mid-1300s. Explain one cross-cultural exchange that would challenge the assertion in the last sentence of the passage concerning the nomad's role in cross-regional exchange before 1450. All right, so here's our first example, and I want you to take a second to pause, but let's go over this real quick. I want you to read over this. I'm not going to take time to read it. I want you to pause. I'll tell you when. To just pause through and actually give them a grade, all right? So go ahead and pause now. Okay, so you've given them a grade, you've given them a score. What score do you think they got? How did they do? Let's look. They scored a 1. A 1. All right, so for example A, one example of trade cultural exchange between nomads and non-nomads was Mongols introducing the saddle to Europe. So here we do have, they answered. It spread through invasion, conquest along the Silk Road. They did cite, right? They're referring specifically to the Silk Road. Europeans adopted it because it allowed for an easier way to ride animals. They did elaborate. So they have their ace right there. They did not earn the point because Mongols did not introduce the saddle to Europe. So this is an important thing to remember. We haven't discussed this yet. But if you're factually wrong, like if you say something incorrect, even if you have the perfect format, you still get the answer wrong. So you have to actually know the information. You have to say correct things. All right. So B, during this period, the Mongols reopened many old trade routes in the Silk Road, thus facilitating trade and cross-regional exchanges. Because they were nomadic, they were able to link between Europe and Asia and reignite the trade routes. This response did not earn the point because the expansion of the Mongol Empire and its effect on the Silk Road trade are out of the specified time period. And like as I just said at that last slide, right? You gotta remember, you gotta know what's happening when, right? And so they didn't get the point because the Mongols were done by 1450. The Byzantine Empire was still trading, so it was still trading with Africa and India during this time, despite all of them being non-nomadic empires. They had their own trade routes and did not rely on nomadic tribes to help with cross-cultural exchange. So they did get a point for that. The response earned the point for discussing Byzantine trade with Africa and India before 1450. All right, so I'm going to give you guys now another example. Here's another person's answer, and I want you to figure out what score did they get, all right? It's It's out of 3. Either they got it right or they got it wrong. All right, so go ahead and in a second, when you go ahead and pause it, read through the answers, and then write down or put into the Edpuzzle what answer or how many points you think they got. All right, pause it now. All right, so how do you think they did? Bum, bum, bum. This was a 3-point answer. That's right. So let's look at this. The Mongols allowed for the cultural exchange of gunpowder. Gunpowder was used in non-nomadic Tang and Song dynasties. However, when the nomadic Mongols arose and began to conquer various expansive lands such as Central Asia and Eastern Europe, the spread of gunpowder to places like the Abbasid Caliphate, which was non-nomadic. All right, we have A. They answered the question. The Mongols allowed the cultural exchange of gunpowder. B. Gunpowder was used in non-nomadic Tang and Song dynasties, very specific. However, when the nomadic Mongols arose and began, they so there was your expanse or elaboration. Right here, number 3, they elaborated on it. So the response earned the point for mentioning that the Mongols facilitated the spread of gunpowder. So we have the right time frame, we got the right people group, so they got that point there. B, the response earned the point for identifying the fact that the expansion of maritime trade in the Indian Ocean basin reduced the importance of Central Asian nomads in cross-regional exchanges because nomads did not have direct access to maritime networks. This is a key one, right? Again, we're talking about the age of exploration. Like that was the hint I gave. You have this age of exploration coming in. And so that's basically what he's talking about, right? Oh, right here, age of exploration, changed the role of Central Asian nomads, sea-based trade especially. All right, and then C, the response earned the point for its discussion on how non-nomadic Arab merchants spread Arabic numerals. Again, they did a good job of touching outside and getting each 3 part of their question. ACE is in there. All right, now let's look at one more example. We're going to look at one last example here, and I want you to answer how you think they did. All right. So here's one more. I want you in just a second to pause your screen and read through the example and write down how you think they did. All right. So just do that. All right. You should have written your answer down. Hit play again, and let's see how they did. So they scored a 2. The response earned the point by identifying the Mongols as a nomadic group and the spread of gunpowder as the cultural exchange. So let's look at this. Specific historical example, a cultural exchange between nomads and non-nomads before 1450 was the conquering of many sedentary states by the Mongols, a nomadic group who spread trade and technology like gunpowder. So the fact they were able to draw that out specifically right there to Asia and the Middle East. Now I do want to point out, right, they did not actually have 3 sentences for their answer here. Right? They were able to do it actually in one long sentence. But this 3-sentence model of acing it is your safest and best way to ensure that you don't accidentally leave something out. All right, so B, this one, the response did not earn the point. The response accurately states that the discovery of silver in South America reinvigorated global trade, but the response inaccurately states that the discovery of silver benefited the nomads. Right, how did this discovery actually benefit the pastoral nomadic culture? Not really. Now, it did benefit the age of exploration, but that would be the Spanish cultures, right? The Portuguese, those that were already sedentary. And then C, the response earned the point for the discussion of how pre-1450 Indian Ocean trade resulted in exchanges of navigational technology and how nomads did not participate in that trade. And so we can see how they used that to overcome the challenge. All right, so I hope this was helpful for you guys. I hope you all have a good idea of like, okay, this is what is being looked for in an SAQ. When we meet back up, I'm actually we're going to take some time to do some practice SAQs in class. So, all right. And if you do need more practice, remember to go on to AP Classroom and do your PPCs, your personal progress checks. And there's also other SAQs out there. You can go to Khan Academy and whatnot. So I gladly provide you links and such for more practice if you need it.